In this video, I review the Spike Steam Condenser. I'm going to give you the pros, the cons, and why it just might be better than a vent hood. How's it going? My name's Brian. I'd like to welcome you to another video. If this is your first time here and you'd like to learn more about electric brewing, see how-to videos, live brew days, and product reviews just like this one, consider subscribing, and if you do, don't forget to click that bell so you won't miss a video when it comes out. In the description below, I'll leave links for the steam condenser as well as a few other links that I think you might enjoy, so be sure to check out the description of the video. Full disclosure on this, the steam condenser was sent to me as part of a beta test program that Spike had, and so just real quickly, I wanted to run over what a steam condenser is. So basically, you have a hat that sits on top of the kettle, and this steam condenser is for the 20-gallon kettle, and it does fit other 20-gallon brewing systems as well, not just the Spike system, Blickman and other 20 gallons. Their steam condenser has a dome shape. It has a port for a CIP ball or clean in place. It does have a plexiglass cover that goes over this. And just a quick tip on that, it does come with a tri-clamp that goes on this, but you really don't have to use that while you're brewing. You can just simply set it on top of there, and there's enough suction that's created to keep it on and in place while you're brewing. So then the other part of the steam condenser, the main part, is this T-pipe here, and this T-pipe actually has a little bit of a downward angle, so that any kind of condensation that forms in this part of the tube will actually roll that way and not go back into the kettle. It also has on here, there is a nozzle in the top up here, and basically what this nozzle does is it sprays water, colder water than what the brewing system is creating, down this tube, and then what happens, it creates a low pressure or a suction down here, a vacuum, and what happens is as the steam forms, it follows this path, and then it gets pulled down into this tube, and then it recondenses back into liquid once it hits that spray of water and this colder air. And then it comes out the tube at the bottom. One important thing to note about this, you do not want to let the tube become fully submerged in water, because of the fact that that would basically, it would stop the vacuum here and it would discontinue the operation of the steam condenser, and it would no longer be pulling steam out because there was not any low pressure there. Now for the water source, Spike did choose to use an external pump with hosing, and this simply attaches to the steam condenser nozzle, the elbow up here, and then you put it into a sump tank. That's how the water is fed into the system, and that is what they chose to do with it. You could probably hook up a garden hose to it if you had some kind of a valve where you could control the flow of it, but their recommendation is to use the pump. It's not a real high pressure pump, but it is enough to create a spray in the nozzle. Now the steam condenser is only used during the boil, so I've actually created a little bit of a brewing montage. I did a hazy IPA. I'm gonna roll that footage, and then at the end I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna tell you what I think the pros and the cons are and why it might be right for you. So grab a beer and I'll see you soon. right, so first let's go over the pros of the steam condenser. One of the pros is that you use less water. Now, with the system, it's going to boil off less, so you're going to use less water, which means you're going to have to use less adjustment salts, less adjustment acid. All those things that go into your brew day, you're going to be using a little bit less of because there's less water. Could also be a con too, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. The next pro is that it uses less power. Now, when I boiled with this thing, I did some testing prior to actually brewing a batch of beer on it, and I ran all the way down to 30% power on the controller to see how the boil was. It was not quite a vigorous boil, so I found that bumping it up to about 40% was a good boil, and it actually rolls really well at 40%, and so that's what I left it on throughout the brew day. One of the other pros is that it doesn't steam up your area, and you don't have to worry about getting a bunch of steam or your walls getting wet and all that kind of thing. All right, so now on to the cons. And one of the first cons is that this thing uses a lot of water for running the steam condenser. I found that it used probably about between 20 and 30 gallons of water to operate the steam condenser, which is quite a bit. And if you're in an area where water costs a bunch of money or there's water conservation or something like that, it definitely is something to be aware of. So that's one of the cons. The other con with it is you may have noticed in the video that my mash was super thick. So that is kind of a byproduct of having less water to boil off, or not boiling off as much liquid. You're going to be starting with less liquid. Now this was a 5-gallon batch, and it was a new profile for Brew Hardware that I was using, which I have corrected and shared, by the way. So if you're interested, I have shared the profile for Brew Hardware on their system, and it should be in the equipment list whenever you go to check it out. But one of the things with that is you're going to have less liquid to deal with and less liquid to mash with. And I also had a bunch of flaked adjuncts in there and some other things, so it wasn't the best performance as far as the mash went on this particular brew, but I mean, we got through it and made a beer, so that wasn't a huge issue. But if you're doing a 10-gallon batch on a 20-gallon system, it's probably not as much of an issue. But if you're doing a 5-gallon batch, there's kind of a fine line there. It may be a little bit better because of the fact that I'm using a prototype basket that has a little bit more of a taper. So in the production model, they actually widened the basket out a little bit, and it should have more surface area and let your grain actually drop down a little bit lower, so your grain bed is not quite as deep. So other than the water usage and the less amount of water for your mash because you're not boiling off as much, really are the only cons that I came up with it. So why would it be better than a hood? Well, first off, with the vent hood, no matter what you do, you're going to get some condensation in the hood. As far as when the vapor comes up, it's going to condense. There's going to be some liquid up in the hood. Even on condensate hood that costs hundreds, even thousands of dollars, you still do have some condensation in there that can drip. Condensate hoods actually have some mechanisms in there to catch that liquid that condenses and then run it off into a drain. But no matter what you do, even with this hood with mine, I do get some drippage here and there, and even some drippage off of some of the things in the basement here because some of the steam does come around. The other thing that this saves you from is having to drill or cut a hole in the side of your house. Because I mean, you should have to have, I would think you need a 6-inch or larger hole or larger vent for the fan. I wouldn't go any smaller than a 6-inch vortex fan or blower fan for your hood. And so that is one of the things that's also a plus. You don't have to cut a hole in the side of your house. The other thing is there's no construction or installation really with the hood. I mean, it's just a matter of the device sits on top of the kettle at boil, and basically it just works. I mean, I found it easy to use. It was very easy to use. Some of the people talked about having a hop basket in here, but if you get a very tall hop screen, you could put it underneath of this opening here and then just drop your hops right straight down into the hop spider, and I don't think you'd have any issue with that. Overall, I think it is a good device. Other than the water consumption, which doesn't bother me too much. I'm on a well, so I mean, I'm not paying for water. I mean, I'm paying for the electricity to run the well and all that stuff. But the water that comes out is not super hot, and at least in my experience, it's probably only about 100 degrees or so. And so you could use it for cleaning or watering, or even put it in your washing machine for washing your clothes or whatever. There is a little bit of a smell to it that when the liquid comes out, it has a little bit of a smell like DMS or some kind of grain smell. It's not nearly as prominent as if you boil without the steam condenser on. I mean, that fills your whole house. This does produce some smell, but not a ton. So that's another kind of a plus if you got somebody in your household that doesn't like that. But overall, I mean, I think it does exactly what it's intended to do. It does it well. And I would say, you know, if you're looking at a solution for a 20-gallon kettle, at this point, they're only making the 20-gallon version, but I know they're going to be making some smaller versions as well. So if you're looking for a solution not to have a hood and not to steam up your place, I think this is certainly a product to take a look at. Ultimately, you have to decide. This has been Brian for Short Circuited Brewers. We'll see you in the next video.